But in Matthew chapter 17 and verse number 1, it said, after 6 days Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into the high mountain apart. And he was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias, saying, talking with him. Then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. Do you feel like that today? It's good for us to be here. Anytime you get around the Lord's people, it's good for you to be around the Lord's people. Think about all the other places you have to go this week. That's worldly. Isn't it good when you get to come around the Lord's people? And y'all of like mind, and we all in one accord, and we got the same purpose to try to expand and spread the gospel of Christ and going out and tell people about Jesus. I picked with little Sam and my grandson Wilder sometime. I used to tell them about Johnny Appleseed. Remember about reading about him in school? And some of y'all don't, but I do. That little story you'd read about Johnny Appleseed. He'd go around spreading apple seeds. I told Sam, I'm Sammy Gospel Seed. I like to go out and spread the gospel. And that's what all of us are supposed to do. And so it's good for us to be here. In verse 5, while we yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear ye him. This is one of the most precious passages in the Bible, because it gives us an understanding that it tells the story how these men, they got a glimpse of the coming kingdom, how things really was. And it's helpful to understand what's happening here, because if you'll take a minute and you look back toward chapter 16, because verse 17 starts with the word and. So that means it's just a continuation. It's referring back to what had taken place. Jesus had just told the disciples that he was on his way to the cross to die for their sins. And he had to rebuke Peter. And he goes on to tell his disciples that he'll not only die on the cross, but he's going to come back one day. He's going to raise again from the dead. Then Jesus makes a very strange statement. If you read this story in Matthew 16:28, he tells the disciples, some of them will not die before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And after 6 days, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up onto this high mountain. And the Bible says there he was transfigured in their presence. These three men were allowed to witness a little bit of what we're going to see a whole lot of when we get to heaven. They was able to see Jesus. He just showed them who he was. And I was thinking about this passage, and the Lord got me thinking on it. We got to working on some thoughts. But before I even start, I'm just grateful that the Lord saved me one day. I'm grateful that the Lord changed my life one day. I'm grateful that I don't have no problem believing in the virgin birth or the vicarious death or his victorious resurrection. I'm glad the Lord opened my eyes to those things. And I'm glad that the Lord showed us this story. I'm glad he took these three men up on the mountain, and he gave them a glimpse of what was on the inside. I just want to preach on this thought I mentioned Wednesday, a meeting on a mountain. There was a meeting took place on a mountain. And what does that mean for us? And what do we get out of this? Because there's one very, very, very important lesson that we're supposed to pick up on as we read this story. Now, it would appear that Jesus took these three men. It would appear that Peter, James, and John was the inner circle. So we're going to look at the people that was at this meeting. He was the Lord's inner circle. In fact, this wasn't the only time that the Lord had taken Peter, James, and John. He had them to go in with him when he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. He had them to go a little deeper with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. And while we know that God's no respecter of person, it's also true that some people are closer to him than others are. And that doesn't mean that God loves them more than he loves others. But what it does mean is that some people are more responsive to God's love than other people are. More people are more drawn to God's love than other Christians are. And you wonder why that person seems to have a joyful spirit about himself. His countenance isn't like other Christians. May just be because he has drawn nigh to God and God has drawn nigh to him. And God's not a respecter of persons. He'll do the same thing for you. But friend, I'm going to tell you, I want to be one of those folks. I want to be like John, who laid his head on the breast of Christ there at the Lord's Supper, and where he could feel the breath of heaven upon him as Jesus would breathe. I want to be one of those men, that the inner circle, those who are just seem to be a little closer to the Lord. I don't understand all it is and how the Lord pointed it out and why the Lord chose these, but there was just something about Peter, James, and John. The Lord just did a little extra, it seemed like, with them. But maybe they were just trying to get a little closer than others. I'm not sure. But these were the people that was at this meeting. Peter, James, and John, and the Lord. The place, it said, was a high mountaintop, there in verse 1. Peter referred to it later on in 2 Peter as the Holy Mount. And John, writing in 1 John, he even made reference to it. He says we only testify those things that we seen and heard. He said, I'm telling you about some things that I saw when I witnessed with my own eyes. This place was the high mount. And after this event, we know these men came down from the mountain with Jesus. And when they came back, then after experiencing this up on the mountain, Jesus transfigured in front of their eyes. After experiencing this, they're up on this mountaintop experience. What happens? They come back down in the valley, straight, have to face the burdens of life. Right off the bat, they run into a demonic spirit. Then after that, they're reminded they have to pay their taxes. But they carried these events. They carried these events in their heart. Now you think about it, just seeing Jesus transfigured and you get down and they want to know, are you paying your taxes? I don't like tax time. I don't like when the county starts sending you them tax bills. I am grateful for our leaders in Moore County because our taxes that went down like 3 or 4 years in a row. But it shouldn't be any taxes. Man shouldn't have to pay property taxes, but that's just how it is. But you celebrate Christmas, you're all excited. Many of them spend more money than we should. Then you get all that paid, and the next thing you know, the county says, oh, by the way, you owe me this. That's what they were coming off this mountaintop experience, and now it's tax time. And what are you trying to say, preacher? I'm trying to tell you this. If you're on a mountain, enjoy it. Enjoy it. Because for long, you're going to be in a valley. That's just life. That's what life is. God never promised, that old song he used to sing, I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden. Y'all never listened to that nonsense growing up. I listened to it and I thought I never wanted a rose garden. But what it's trying to say, or you look through things with rose-colored glasses. There's times in life, everything's not always going to be cheerful. So you enjoy the mountaintop experiences. You're not protected from sadness and sorrow. That's part of life. By the way, which was caused by sin. You want to see the problem, why people die? You want to know why you have aches and pains? All people sin. I had a young man that asked me the other day, he said, preacher, can I ask you a question? It may be stupid. I said, you can ask me whatever you want to ask me. He said, when Jesus died on the cross, does that mean that the earth's not under a curse anymore? Now, he was just asking a question he didn't understand. I said, son, do you sweat when you work? Do you ever prick yourself with a thorn? And I went on. And he said, oh, yeah. Then he began to understand. We're going to experience troubles and trials in this life. So here's the people at this meeting. Here's the place up on a high mountain. And then the presentation that took place was in verse 2. It said Jesus was transfigured. That means metamorphosis. If you ever said in English class, everybody know, I'm not English class, biology class, you know what metamorphosis means. Meta means to change, morph means form. So what happened? It was a change of form or appearance that Christ did right there in the presence of these men. They always used the caterpillar and the butterfly as an example. But my friend, I can tell you, what took place up there was Jesus, who was robed in flesh, he allowed what was underneath that flesh to shine through and let them see just a little bit of what heaven's about. He let them see a little bit about, remember he told them, that some of you not going to die until you see the kingdom. They got to see things that other men didn't get to see. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'd been up on that mountain, and Jesus, who I'd been with there now for a period of time, and I'd watched him do this, and I'd watched him do that. I'd watched him hunger. I'd watched him as he rested when he was tired, doing everything that any man does. But all of a sudden, the Lord says, I want to show you something. And he lets what's on the inside come forth. Remember Wednesday night, I mentioned here, and I'll mention it again, too many times preachers are guilty of trying to change people on the outside. It's about what's on the inside. If you take a drunk and you get him off alcohol, you get him in AA and he becomes sober and he's lost, he'll just go to hell sober. You take a prostitute who walk around hardly clothed and you put clothes on her, she'll go to hell better dressed. Our job is not to try to change people's outside. Our job is to preach to them something that will change them on the inside. The Lord said, I'm going to show you what's on the inside. Friend, I'm telling you, we get too guilty so many times as preachers. It's not an outside-in thing. It's an inside-out thing. Jesus takes up residence in your heart. I was over at my daughter's house the other night. She was putting Sam to bed, and I heard them back down in the hall, and she said, night, night, Sam. As she was shutting the door, Sam said, Mama, I'll miss you. And I heard my daughter say, but Sam, remember, I'm always in your heart. If you miss me, just touch your heart and I'm there. And I thought, man, that's sweet. But then I heard little Sam call back from his bed, Mama, you ain't in my heart. God's in my heart. I said, thank the Lord for that. It's an inside thing, friend. The Lord, he was transfigured. He showed them something. The Lord up on that mountaintop. Until that moment, he was just another Jew who did a lot of remarkable and unexplainable things. He was just like everybody else, looked like everybody else, but he wasn't everybody else. But on that mountain, the glory that was concealed inside his human body, the Lord allowed it to burst forth. You see, this was, and it wasn't the first time that Jesus had experienced a metamorphosis in his life. The first time was when he was placed within the tomb of a virgin. He left heaven, because you know Jesus existed before that, right? He's always been. But he again transformed and put himself in the womb of a virgin. He was born in Bethlehem. He merely just concealed his heavenly fame within an earthly frame, like Philippians 2, 5 through 8 tells us. But on that mountaintop that day, the glory on the inside was visible on the outside. And Peter, seeing it and seeing what Jesus done, Peter said, it's a good thing that we're here. Now, this isn't in any of my notes, but I just happened to think about it. There's some times growing up that I think back, it was a good thing that I was there. I saw some things that I didn't even know about. I didn't understand at the time, but looking back now, they were good things. Well, my grandpa used to get, on my daddy's side, would get so drunk, he'd go out in the woods and pass out, and his my grandma would get so worried she'd call my dad and say, your daddy's out in the woods, passed out, he's going to freeze to death. And my daddy would make me go with him. I was just a little boy. I didn't want to go look for some drunk out in the woods. I didn't even understand that stuff. But my daddy would make me go with him. Didn't understand it then, but now I understand it. It was a good thing I saw what alcohol would do to a man. Because I made my mind up, I didn't want to have nothing to do with it. And I've never drank a beer in my whole life. Ever. I didn't want to be around it. It was a good thing I was there. I didn't realize it at the time. It was a good thing when I was sitting in church as a little boy. When my mom and daddy would drag me to church, you didn't have an option. It wasn't up for discussion. You're just going to church. And I sat there and I heard many sermons. I've heard many Sunday school teachers. I've heard many prayers. But I remember in my mind times when men would step out and you'd think what was wrong with them, and they'd be broken, and they'd fall on their face, and you would see them call out to the Lord to save them, or women, the same thing. And then later on you would see their lives as it was completely different. That was a good thing that I was there to see that. We see so much filth and wickedness in this world. It's a good thing when you get in the right place. I was asked last night to be at a place at 5 o'clock for some judge here in the county, and the man that wanted me to go, I called him and let him know, I'm a Baptist preacher on Saturday nights. My mind don't need to be on that kind of stuff. My mind needs to be on what's important. It was a good thing when I opened my Bible yesterday evening and started reading it. It's a good thing when I close my eyes and pray. I'm glad that Peter, when he saw Jesus, it was a good thing. Now I'll tell you this, you say, well, I never saw Jesus. I never saw him on the cross, Miss Charity, but I know he was there. I never saw him transfigured on a high mount, but I know he did. You say, how do you know? Because his spirit bears witness with me. I believe this book from front to cover. There's nothing in here I don't believe. You say Jonah couldn't have got swallowed by a whale. Do you believe that, preacher? Absolutely. If this book would have said Jonah swallowed the whale, I would believe it. I believe this book. But I never saw those things. I didn't get to see his back parts like Moses did when he hid him in the cleft of the rocks. I never got to see that. I never heard him speak in an audible voice like Abraham and Jacob and Moses and Elijah and others. I never heard that. I've never been sitting there and heard a voice literally speak out of heaven to me. I've never heard it. I've never been within the veil of the Holy of Holies and been engulfed by the glory cloud that dwelt there. I've never been able to do that. But I'll tell you what, there have been times in my life when I've been in the place where heaven brushed up next to earth and things got a little foggy. I've been in some meetings like that. Say, what do you mean, preacher? I mean, I've been in meetings where you don't know why tears are just flowing from your face like a water spigot. Because the Lord got to moving in those meetings. I've been in 2 or 3 of them. I'm going to give you a little example. If you would have been here for the Thanksgiving service we had on that Tuesday, you could say that too, because that's exactly what happened here that night. The Lord got real in this place. I've been places where I've seen grown men on their hands and knees just weeping. Preachers that I respect, hold high esteem, where God got to moving in a service and you couldn't even get none of them to look up. Because it got so quiet and it got so heavy in the place. They've been a few times. I didn't get to see these things we're reading about. If you've been reading your Bible in chronological order like we talked about, and if you happen to have started with the New Testament, you've been reading about these miracles. I didn't get to see that stuff, but it happened. It happened. My wife told me the other day, she said, I was just reading, and she said, I was just laughing when I was reading this. And then later that day, I was reading the same thing. We're on the same little list going through there, and we get to talk about them miracles. But you know, the biggest miracle of all, Paul, is the ones we don't know about. When it said he just walked into the city and the streets were lined with untold, who knows how many people. And everybody he walked by, it said he healed them all. Don't tell you names, don't tell you what all, but whatever disease they had, they was healed from it. I was never by the pool of Bethesda when the waters got troubled. And whoever first stepped in was healed of whatever disease they had. I never got to see that. But I believe it. And I've seen God work in the lives of plenty of men and women over the years. I'm telling you, what those men got to see on that mountain, our mind just can't calculate, can't sit there and you can try to concentrate on it. But his glory burst forth. The flesh couldn't contain it anymore. They got to see something, friend. There've been times, like I said, when he's pulled the veil back and give us a glimpse of him. But man, I would have liked to have been there that day to see this. So we know who was there, the people. We know where it took place on the high mountain. We know what happened. But there were some other folks there. You've got the people, you've got the place, you've got the presentation, and you've got the prophets. See, there were some heavenly visitors showed up on the scene. Moses and Elijah. We're told that when Jesus was transfigured, he was visited by two famous Old Testament characters, Moses and Elijah. A lady told me yesterday, her little boy said somebody at school told him that we wouldn't know each other in heaven. And they asked me about it. I said, well, they sure knew Moses and Elijah when they showed up. And I said, don't believe that nonsense. But the appearance of these two men is a marvelous miracle, and there's a lot of lessons you and I can learn. Why those two? For instance, Moses had been dead over 1,500 years when this event took place. But here he is, moving around, walking and talking with the Lord. You say, what's the lesson we can get out of there? Life doesn't end when you draw your last breath here. It's just beginning. You are just then. This is the land of the dying that we're in today. But one of these days, we're going to enter the land of the living. The church, we sing that song, to heaven's land I'm on my way, where the soul of man never dies. It's singing all about heaven, but let me tell you, the soul doesn't die in hell either. You're going to live forever. It's up to you where you're going to live forever. These prophets showed up. Been dead 15 years, but he's very much alive. More so now than ever. So this just serves to remind us that the redeemed who die, they don't go to a grave to wait for a resurrection, but they've already with the Lord, absent with the body. They're present with the Lord. Said 2 Corinthians 5:8 says we're confident in that. That's saying rather to be absent with the body is be present with the Lord. Or Philippians 1:23, for I'm in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart, to be with Christ, which is far better. Paul said, I'm torn between staying here and preaching, thus saith the Lord, and wanting to be with Christ. He knew there was not a second he would ever spend in a cemetery. These men showed up who had been in heaven. But another thought is, Moses died on a mountain in the embrace of God, and God conducted his funeral and carried his spirit home to glory. So Moses represents those believers who die in the faith. That's another thought. You say, how did Moses get saved? By faith. How did Abraham get saved? By faith. How did Isaac get saved? By faith. How did Rahab the harlot get saved? By faith. You can read all about it. How are you saved? By faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. Moses represents those believers who died in the faith. Elijah, he never died. He was carried off to heaven on a chariot of fire, and he represents those saints of God who will one day be gathered up in the rapture and taken on to glory. Those who are not going to have to see death. You say, is that even possible? Yes, it's possible. How is it possible? Because the Lord said that's what's going to happen. That he's coming back one day for his bride. Those who are believers, I could be up here preaching, you could be sitting there listening, I could get ready to take a step, and before my foot hit the ground, I could be in glory. That fast. He's coming for his own. Elijah represents them that's not going to have to die, that went on. He was carried off. What these two men, these famous men, what were they doing when they met Jesus on the mountain? Well, if you look in Luke 9:31, it said, who appeared in glory and spake of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem. That amazes me. Now, Moses and Elijah came. They were talking to Jesus. And what were they talking about? They're talking about his upcoming death on the cross. They were discussing his death. And how would you have liked to have been here in that conversation? How would you have liked, and by the way, the word deceased, it don't mean, the word deceased means exodus. It means I'm leaving. Time to depart. Paul said the time of my departure is at hand. These three, Moses, Elijah, and the Lord, they were talking about the day when Jesus would make his exodus out of his human body. You see, Moses represented the law. Elijah represented the prophets. The law and every sacrifice prescribed in it pointed ahead to Christ and the perfect fulfillment of the law. The prophets, on the other hand, they spoke of one who was to come as a perfect sacrifice and our Redeemer. So the bottom line is that Moses and Elijah came to exalt the greatness of Jesus and to reveal to his disciples that he was who he said he was. Imagine the excitement. Imagine if you was Peter, James, and John, you're up on the mountain with the Lord, and all of a sudden, Moses and Elijah showed up. Imagine they're talking about when the Lord's going to leave this fleshly body. Talking about the time he's going to die, buried, and rose again for you and I. Imagine that. So the people that was there, the place on the mountain, the presentation, God, the Lord transfigured himself. The prophet showed up. And then the power showed up. Without me, you can do nothing. The one in which all power and all authority resonates from and is possible, he showed up. God, there was heavenly visitors, then there was a heavenly voice. God spoke up. Verse 5, while he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. God spoke up. When this happens, you can read in Luke 9, Peter, James, and John, they was falling asleep. And when they woke up, they saw what was going on. And Peter, as usual, he had to say something. Mark says, and Mark 9:6 says, they wished not what to say. I can tell you this, folks, sometimes when you don't know what to say, don't say nothing. But you know how Peter was. Peter was going to say something. I don't believe Peter was a Democrat. Because I told you, Democrats, it don't matter what you ask them, they're going to answer you. They're going to give you an answer. Most of the time if they have to make it up. The best thing to do if you don't know the answer, if you don't know, just say, I don't know. Peter had the same problem many other times as well. You know, he'd always put his mouth into motion before he got his brain into gear. And just like I said, for the record, you know, we are like that a lot of times ourselves. Don't talk just for the sake of talking, because the Bible says we're going to have to give an account for every idle word that we even speak. So when Peter does speak, he wants to build 3 tabernacles on that mountain. He saw what was going on. He said, it's good that we're here. And Lord, I want to build 3 tabernacles. Now, it didn't take me, I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not one of these theologians that you would pay money to come and let him speak upon what all he knows. And he's very intelligent because he tells you he is. I'm not one of those. But it didn't take me long while reading this to understand that when Peter started talking about making tabernacles for Moses and Elijah, something was wrong. Oh, there's no need for a tabernacle for Moses or Elijah. They just sinners saved the same way you're saved. There was one there, though, that deserved it. His name was Jesus. Now, on the surface, it seems fine. Peter was just excited. Here is Moses, been dead 15 years. He's alive. We need to leave a monument. That's how people, they're concerned in our society today. They want their names on a building. They want their names or a little statue made of them, or they just want to be remembered. But I can tell you, whether you're going to be remembered or not comes down to one thing. Have you been born again? If you've not been born again, you'll be cast into hell, where they don't name the folks there because your name don't matter no more. You're just cast alive into a lake of fire, tormented day and night for all eternity. But if you're born again, you'll be remembered. You'll be like we said about Brother Fred Teague, and we preached his funeral recently, that the potter took him off the wheel and put him on display. He's a believer. Peter, though, said, let's build tabernacles for him. Oh, Donald Trump's getting ready to build him a big ark to fire with his name on it in Washington. Why? All these paintings, they paid millions and millions and millions of dollars for. All these things that man just goes to, almost worships. I want to go to the Louvre. I didn't even know what that was until recently. Or what's called the Louvre. And the Louvre sounds a lot alike. And the Louvre is a bathroom. I know that. But one of these days, all that stuff's going to be gone. The only thing that matters is what you did with Christ. He wanted to build these. He wanted to build them for them. It seemed good like on the surface. But when he started talking that nonsense, the power showed up. God speaks from heaven. God hears his son being compared to Moses and Elijah. That's what he's hearing. Peter said, let's make a tabernacle for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. God, the powerful one, the all-powerful one, spoke from heaven. He said, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. It's not about Moses. It's not about Elijah. Let me let you in on some things. It's not about your preacher. It's not about some of these preachers out there trying to make big names for themselves. It's about Christ and Christ alone. That's it. And any church that exalts or tries to lift up high and make much of their preacher or whoever else, they're missing the point. This is supposed to be about Christ. But I know some places like that, they make much of the preacher. We don't need that. When I came here, there was pictures of the preachers on the walls there. I took them all down. Because I knew what come next. My picture on there. And I didn't want it on here. You know what I am? I'm just one of the sinners saved by grace like you. Who the Lord called into a work, and I'm doing my best. But if you ever, anything in you starts looking at me, you're looking in the wrong direction. If you start looking at me, you'll never see me looking back at you. Because I'm going to keep my eyes fixed on him. He's the one that matters. God, when he saw that Peter was trying to compare his son to Moses and Elijah, he reminds everyone on the mountain that Jesus is far greater than Moses and the law, far greater than Elijah and the prophets. And in truth, Jesus is the fulfillment of both of them, and he alone is worthy to be praised, and he's worthy of our worship. When Jesus came out of the private years from time he was 12 to he was around 30, we didn't hear anything about him at his baptism. God was heard then to express, "This is my beloved Son whom I'm well pleased." So here in the midst of this public ministry of Jesus, God again declares that he's his pleasure, that he's pleased with his Son. You see, Jesus is the reason for this meeting on the mountain. He's the reason they're having the meeting. And today, far too many, like I said, are worshiping preachers, worshiping the Bible, worshiping the church building, worshiping their doctrines, worshiping their religion. But what they need to be worshiping is the Lord. Now, what has your worship today? I've seen folks put name tags on the pews. I bought this in honor of da. And they act like they own the pew. And they almost worship it. I've seen this stuff. You can't sit here. Only this family can sit here. They're the only ones worthy to sit on this pew. Guess what it is? It's a pew. That's all it is. And I've told you before, like I was telling somebody for church, if you give something to Bright Light Baptist Church, you donate something to Bright Light Baptist Church, it belongs to Bright Light. It don't belong to you anymore. So if you want to keep your fingers held on it, don't donate it or give it to the church. Too many people. I told you, we replaced the doors at a church one time, and it had been there 28 years, and a man come to me and said, "I donated them doorknobs to the church 28 years ago. They mine. I want them back." They was 28 years old. The doors weighed about 200 pounds apiece. I left the doorknobs on them and put them in my truck and took the doors and everything to his house and put them in his yard. There you go. You say, "Preacher, you shouldn't have done that." I know, but it sure felt good when I was doing it. You want your doorknobs back? We're going to give them to you. When you give something to the Lord, it's the Lord's. And we shouldn't attach things to it. This was about Jesus. And now Jesus, God, once again, he shows up. When he was baptized, he said, "This is my beloved Son." Now he's doing it again. And I'll ask you, what is it you worship today? Or who or what do you exalt today? Just let me ask you like I was asked one day. What do you spend your money on? And where do you spend your time doing? And what do you find yourself thinking about all the time? That's your God. That's what you're worshiping now. We better make sure we keep our eyes and our hearts focused on him. You can worship as a parent your children if you're not careful. The Bible said Josiah became king when he was 8 years old. That's the problem in our society today. There are too many 8-year-old kings running households. That's the problem. One woman told me one time, said, me and my daughter are best friends. I said, your daughter don't need a best friend. She needs a mama. Who are you exalting? Who are you making the most of today? Friend, I'm telling you, this is about him. That meeting on the mountain was about him. I told Brother Earl, I said, I like this sermon that the Lord gave me some thoughts on. I said, call it's good until you get to the last point. It's all exciting. The people, the place, the presentation, the prophets. the powerful, I could have said the potentate, but I didn't want to confuse none of y'all. They showed up. But lastly, the problem. You say, what's the problem? He said, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. But he didn't stop there. He said, hear ye him. Now you think about that. Of the untold and countless things God the Father could have said at that moment in time, he simply said, hear ye him. God is telling us that the words that's coming out of the mouth of his Son is so important. It's more important than anything else going on in the universe at that moment in time. The most important thing we need to understand is to hear ye him. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So the good God of glory on that day commanded them, commands you and I to hear him. So to listen to his word and allow it to saturate our souls, that's what we're supposed to do. I had about 5 sheets of paper about things he said, and then I just left them at the house. I said, but there are a couple things I want to mention. We need to hear him. My question to you today is, at this meeting, the same thing applies to you. Are you listening to him? Are you hearing him? Remember I told you before, you can't help what you see, but you can help what you look at. There's a difference. You can't help what you hear from time to time, but you can control what you listen to. That's up to you and I. So I'm asking you today, do you hear him? Are you hearing him? You know, he's the one that said, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. He said that. He said, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. He said that. He said there's only one way to heaven. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He said, I'm the door to heaven. I'm the bread of life. I'm the vine and ye are the branches. He said, I'm the good shepherd. You're the sheep. I'm the shepherd. He goes on and on. Are you hearing him today? Are you understanding what he says? Are you understanding that Jesus is calling out his believers to come out from the world and to be separate? Are you understanding that the words that proceeded out of his mouth and the actions are the words of life? That's why the God of heaven who loves us is saying, listen to what he's telling you. Why would God have to tell man to listen to him? I don't know. Why don't we go back to the Garden of Eden? When God told Adam, every fruit, everything in this garden, Adam, is for you. I prepared this place for you. You can live here, enjoy life, and prosper, and commune with me and have a relationship with me. But Adam, don't eat of that one tree. The tree of knowledge of good and of evil. Do not partake of that tree. Don't eat of that tree, Adam. I'm telling you, everything is yours. But you stay away from that. Maybe that's why God had to say, hear ye him, because man didn't listen to God to start with you. You think maybe that's why God added that in there? And thank you, Lord, that wasn't even in my notes either. Maybe that's why God said we need to hear what he's got to say. Because the first commandment God ever gave man, he broke it. Plunged the world off into sin. Hear ye him. Luke 13 said, then one said unto him, Lord, are there few that be saved? Jesus was asked the question, are there few that be saved, or are there many like we think? Oh, there's many avenues to Christians. As long as you're sitting in the church, you're on your way to heaven. If you're good, if you obey the laws of the land, you're on your way to heaven. That's called being a good citizen. That don't give you eternal life. And he asked Jesus in Luke 13, are there few that be saved? You know what the Lord had to say to that? And he said unto them, strive to enter at the strait gate, for many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in and shall not be able. When once the master of the house is risen up and hath shut to the door, And ye begin to stand without and to knock at the door, saying, Lord, Lord, open unto us. And he shall answer and say unto you, I know you not whence ye are. Then shall ye begin to say, we have eaten and drunk in thy presence, and thou hast taught in the streets. But he said, I tell you, I know you not whence you are. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity. I want you to hear him. What's he saying? He's saying everybody's not going to heaven. He's actually saying most people, the majority of people, are not going to heaven. You think of all the people in the world today and the many false religions that teach a completely different way to heaven. So all those folks are doomed. Then you think those who pick up a Bible and they read the way to heaven, the Bible said there's a small group of them that's going to heaven. Everybody's not going, friend. That's why we need to be more concerned about our loved ones. Well, what happens if you don't go to heaven? Hear ye him, Luke 16, talking about the rich man, and in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torment. So everybody's not going to heaven. Are you hearing him? Just because you walked in Bright Light Baptist Church don't mean you're going to heaven. Are you hearing him? Then look at Luke 14. Then said he unto them, a certain man made a great supper and bade many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, come, for all things are now ready. The Lord said, a man made this feast. He invited his people. And one by one, it said, and they all with one consent began to make excuse. God said, hear him, hear what he's saying to you. The first said, I bought a piece of ground, and I must needs go and see it. I pray thee, have me excused. That excuse isn't going to work. The next one said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and go to prove them. I pray thee, have me excused. And another said, I married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. He didn't even say, have me excused. He didn't say, my wife won't let me. But friend, I can tell you this. Verse 24, he said, for I say unto you that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. God says, I don't want to hear your excuses. God says, hear him. Jesus said these excuses, they're not going to hold up when the time comes. Your excuses down here, they're not going to be accepted. God said, listen to what my son says. Now, this is Jesus saying. So them excuses don't hold, they're not going to work. When you stand before me and you start giving me excuses, it's not going to work. Like I was telling Brother Glenn, it's this simple. People don't want to hear it. You can't serve both God and mammon. You can't. You can't have two masters. Because if you do, you'll look at one and love on him and hate the other one. You're going to have to pick him and choose him. God said, hear him what he's trying to tell you. The unconcerned attitudes of this generation is nothing more than a turning away from sound doctrine. Jesus said that was going to happen. You ever wonder why so many Christian lives are being wrecked and ruined? It's simple. They're not listening to the words of the Lord. They're not hearing him. They're not following his footsteps. A preacher friend said one time before, he's preaching a sermon. And he said, you'll drift, and when you're riding down the road, you'll find yourself drifting in whichever the way you're looking at. Too many Christians or so-called Christians have turned their eyes off from the Lord. If you're looking in the direction of the world, friend, you'll find yourself in the world. I was asked recently why I thought so many folks today were not serious about serving the Lord. People used to be in God's house. You couldn't keep them out of God's house. But now, for some reason, even coming to church on Sunday morning, they consider it a burden. And they think the Lord is going to say, I'm good with that. He's not good with that. Your excuses isn't going to hold. God said, hear ye him. The truth is, many folks that used to be here faithfully, they used to serve in the church, they used to do things, and they don't come no more. They've lost their love for him. That's it. You say, can it be that simple, preacher? Yeah, they don't love the Lord like they used to. It's that simple. How can you prove that? Because you'll do what you love. If you love the golf course, that's where you'll be. If you love your deer stand, that's where you'll be. If you love the ball field, that's where you'll be. If you love the racetrack, that's where you'll be. If you love shopping, that's where you'll be. If you love traveling, that's where you'll be. Folks just don't love the Lord like they used to. But God said, hear ye him. I'm sorry, but I'm, it's my job to tell you the truth. And the truth is, too many people, they've got a taste of the world and it was sweet to their mouth and they like it until they realize how bitter it is in the stomach. The Bible said Moses rejected the pleasures of the sin of this world. He chose rather to suffer with God's people. Gandhi, he was a Hindu. He was a big religious leader in Hinduism. People think highly of him. And Gandhi, he said, I read the Bible. He said, I liked it. He said, I like the concept of Christ. And he said, I almost became a Christian. Here's what his excuse. It's not going to hold anything either. But his excuse was, until I saw how unlike Christ his followers really were. And it just turned him off from him. This is my beloved Son, whom I'm well pleased. Hear ye him. Pianists come, altar's open. If you're here today and you're lost, today's the day to get saved. Say, how do you know? Because I'm listening to him. He said today is the day of salvation, not tomorrow. If you're here today and you're not as close to the Lord as you need to be, today's the day to fix that. But friend, I'm telling you as your preacher, look around what's going on in our society, in this world. Time is coming to an end. I even heard a Jewish man yesterday. I was listening to him. He said, I was reading in the book of Ezekiel. He was reading Ezekiel 38, 39. And he said, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And he started talking about how the things in this world are lining up exactly. He had just found that. I'm telling you, if you'll pay attention, this thing right here that we know is wrapping up. Hear ye him. Hear ye him.